Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3, 2013, the gentleman from California, Mr. Garamendi, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. One would think after all of the hours and hours of discussion that have taken place on this floor that perhaps enough has been said. And that may be true, but so much of what was said seems not to be clarifying and providing clear understanding of what's actually happened here. We want to take a few minutes here, probably maybe as much as an hour, possibly less than that, and try to gain some clarity as to how we got to this point with a government shutdown, how we can get out of it, and what the impact is on Americans. There are good days and there are bad days, and then there are really, really bad days. About 12:30 last night, as we were finishing the votes here on the floor, it became very apparent that government had indeed shut down and that there wasn't any hope of resurrecting it in the final hours of last night. And so today, all across America, government offices are shut down. You just heard a description of the World War II memorial, and that's but an example. How did we get here? How did this happen? We have been, over the last 3 years now, dealing with one manufactured crisis after another. They came to be known as cliffs, fiscal cliff, debt limit cliff, on and on. Each time we would come up to some deadline and it was made into a crisis. Our Republican friends were usually they were always the instigators of this, at least since 2010 election. And what has happened is they have used these deadlines, which come and go every year, as an opportunity to leverage in one or another policy changes. And that's been going on. I think one of the most noteworthy of these deadlines was the fiscal cliff that occurred in the summer of 2011, in which the United States came up against its debt limit, and it was just a moment away from that default. Fortunately, there were negotiations underway, and it did lead to a settlement. The settlement, of course, was the infamous sequester. Wasn't supposed to happen. Nobody liked it. It was in the bill, and it did happen, and now we're living with it. As time went on, we've had even more of these moments of crises. And yesterday was yet one more. Occurs on a regular basis every October 1st. We start a new fiscal year, and that's an opportunity for us to look at all of the expenditures of the federal government, make decisions about what should be or should not be funded and what level it should be funded at. So we had a crisis last night, and the result is the federal government is largely unfunded. And monuments across the nation, national parks, Veterans Administration offices, Social Security offices, and the rest are in the process of being shut down, and some are shut down. This is not a good thing. It's a very bad thing. It's bad for this nation. I was there in 1995 as Deputy Secretary at the Department of Interior when the Department of Interior was shut down. National Parks, Fish and Wildlife Service, U.S. Geological Survey, studies underway about the nature of everything from earthquakes to hurricanes and the like were just put aside for 26 days. We're back in that today. It could have been avoided. It should have been avoided. And had we followed through on the normal process of establishing a budget for the United States, it would have been, or most likely would have been, avoided. Why didn't that happen? The House of Representatives passed a budget in March. The Senate passed a budget about the same time. The Senate requested a conference committee, and to this moment, from April to this moment, no conference committee on the budget has been established. Now, the budget gives the framework in which the appropriations for all of the federal offices, Department of Defense, Parks, and so forth, are funded within that framework of the budget. So without a framework, we were literally wandering in the dark, and some very, very bad things happened. What happened was we came up against the deadline, and a continuing resolution which continues to fund the government. The first issue was for 2 months until December 15th, and then it eventually came down to November 15th. That continuing resolution, sometimes called a CR, actually provided less money than the Senate version of the budget. It was $986 billion, which is the sequestration amount that would continue forward. So while virtually every person in this entire House, 435 of us, said sequestration was bad and we'll never vote for sequestration again, we were in fact presented with a sequestration appropriation, continuing resolution that would go for 2 months. The sequestration was in fact built into that. Now, the Democrats looking at this said, we don't want a shutdown. We will accept, we will compromise for 2 months and accept the lower funding level. So when people go back and forth here and say there was no effort to compromise, that's not true. The fact of the matter is the Democrats said, to avoid the shutdown of government, we will accept the sequestration level of government, which was some I think over $50 billion less than what we would like to have spent to keep the programs going. Along the way, our Republican colleagues decided that they would use this moment to terminate the Affordable Health Care Act. And we're going to spend some time on that this evening. The termination of the Affordable Health Care Act would affect every American in many, many ways, and we will spend some time talking about all of those ways. So by combining these two, the CR, which the Democrats accepted, and had it pass the House and the Senate, there would be no government shutdown. But by joining to that the desire, particularly of the Tea Party Republican caucus members, we wound up with a stalemate. We need to understand exactly what was in the CR and exactly what was the impact of the, what shall we say, there's 3 different versions of this. One version was to repeal, in other words, just wipe out the entire law, the Affordable Health Care Act or Obamacare. Another was to delay all of it, and then yet a third was to delay just a piece of it. So there have been different iterations, but each one would dramatically affect the people of America. I'd like now to turn to my colleague from Texas, Sheila Jackson Lee, who will pick up this issue.
The chair would clarify that the gentleman was recognized for half the time remaining before 10 p.m. or approximately 54 minutes. The gentleman may proceed.
Talk fast, Sheila.
I think, and let me